we don't call it Web 2 right now, this internet that we're in. So in another year or so, we're not even going to call it Web 3.
Yeah.
So with that, I think the fundamentals and making sure those through lines of if it's on the marketing aspect, like, do they know how to build a community? Do they know how to storytell for a product? Do they know how to build brand loyalty? Those things are going to be the same throughout Web 2, Web 3, probably Web 4, 5, 6, 7.
Mm.
Like those are the things that are not going to change. It's all about forming those connections, right?
Welcome to W3G, the official podcast for Myosin.xyz and your go-to hub to learn the latest developments in growth and marketing in the wild and wonderful world of Web3. I'm Julie Octaviano.
And I'm Blake Minaho Kim. Tune in each week as we talk to the best and brightest and keep uncovering insights so we can all grow together in the world of Web3.
Today, we'll be speaking with Carly Long. Carly is a Web3 recruiter, an artist, a PR and media lead, and is building the Women in Web3 community via her weekly newsletter and podcast.
Carly is truly a modern-day Renaissance woman, and we're excited to share a conversation where we discuss hiring trends in Web3, best tips and tricks to enter the space, and how to build community and grow your own media empire.
So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome, Carly. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm honored to be number 2. That is awesome. Very excited to be with you guys kicking this off.
Likewise. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. Also, fun fact about Carly and I, we actually met because she interviewed me for a Web3 job. And I feel like we just kind of like hit it off, got to talking. And long story short, we ended up working with her through a partnership for one of our Myosin clients and just kept in touch. And yeah, I feel like you're a recruiter turned friend. And here you are as guest number 2 on W3G. So happy to have you on.
Ditto. I was blown away by everything that you said you're already doing in this space. It's like, wait, you want another job? How can you add that to your plate? That's how it goes, though. I know in this space, people say they have their 9 to 5s and 5 to 9s, and
Yeah,
it's a constant grind in between. But yeah, it was awesome getting to know you, Julie, through the recruiting, and I feel like that's how a lot of relationships in this space have come about. They're very organic, and sometimes I'll hop on a call with someone who I think is going to be a client. And they're like, oh, no, I want a Web3 job. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, we can chat about that too.
nice. Well, I definitely want to double click on that in terms of the connection building because you seem to be a master at it. But I want to first backtrack a little because I always like to start off by understanding, what you're up to, what led you into recruiting, but also recruiting specifically within Web3. So I just want to hear a little bit about your journey before we dive into some of those additional questions.
Absolutely. My journey is not traditional. I've lived a lot of lives. I've always said I've lived a lot of places. I will break it down to like right before I started recruiting and working in Web3, I was always doing PR. I was in the weddings, destination events, and then nonprofits. And I guess some people would say generalist. I like to say Renaissance woman. That's how I would define myself. So I was always working with like different companies or businesses that interested me. One of them was recruiting. I was doing some PR for them. And I honestly, I tried talking with Matthew, the founder, about this. I was like, at what point did I start actually recruiting? And we don't remember. I just feel like at some point I just got started because to me, it's really all connection based, right? Like, PR, it's your connections, I was going to say selling, but sharing a story with the media, and it's selling, sometimes spinning. And in recruiting, it's really those connections. You're connecting a candidate to a job, to a company. And it just, in my brain, the parallels were right there. But as soon as I placed my first few candidates, I remember the impacts of how I felt after doing it was so much greater. Just having Julie, like how you said, we, chatted over a job and became friends. We're able to like keep in touch on this, that, and the other thing. That's what happens when you're helping someone get a job that they're going to be doing and spending their entire day on. You get closer with them. So then once they do land it and they either, get a big title change or a big pay raise or they get benefits for their kids because they were contracting before and didn't have health benefits, whatever those things are, it changes the game for their
Yeah.
life. It's like a total up level, and it's really cool to play a very small part in that. So I fell in love with it. Needless to say, the Web3 aspect came, guess like a year and a half or so ago now. For people who are watching this, as you can see behind me, I also am an artist. I paint in my free time. It was always like my form of art therapy. And I had seen, it was over some holiday break. I remember I was with my family and I just like needed to sneak away and get some alone time. And I was on my phone looking at the news. And I was seeing these articles on people making millions off their drawings and their artwork as NFTs. And I was like, what is this? Like, what the
That could
hell
be
is
me.
an NFT? Yeah. And so I started diving into it. I was super intimidated because I do not have a technical background. And I was like, Web3, blockchain. Oh my God, these words are scary. I have no clue what any of this means.
Yeah.
But Matthew, the founder of Weld, he at the same time was taking smart contract courses. He's like, just start having those conversations during the day. Just like start learning, just record everything that you do. I was like, but I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm learning. But that today is what became the Women in Web3 podcast, a newsletter that I do, and very organically just kind of snowballed into me realizing I was not going to make $1 million off my paintings as NFTs, but that it could really work as a new specialty and subset for our recruiting business. So that was long-winded, but
and so
true.
So I guess your boss kind of said, hey, keep exploring Web3, right? And you start exploring, you start playing around with it. How did you guys actually end up? Because right now you're doing Web3 recruiting. Like, did that just develop organically, or how did that come about as well?
It was pretty fast. Matthew's a mastermind. I always say he has a crystal ball. He refuses for that to be true, but he just like has always known what's coming down the pipe. And as we would be talking, we just started seeing where like not every, but a lot of the engineering roles that we're filling, they're going to start needing to be blockchain developers or smart contract engineers. And all of these NFT projects that we're seeing, they're going to need community managers and they're going to need marketers and the PR. And so combining my background in like the PR and marketing aspect, and then Matthew's in the technical, more engineering aspect, we were like, oh, we can start tackling a lot of these jobs. And for whether it's, Web2 brands that are looking to build something out in the space, or startup Web3 companies, we're like, oh, we can help them get their founding teams in Web3 together. But the process of getting Web3 clients and jobs it started very naturally, organically. Once I started doing the podcast, I think people just kind of put two and two together, like, oh, they must do Web3 recruiting since they're talking about that. And that's how it started.
Nice. Wait, so just to clarify, so was Weld Recruiting traditionally, did it start off as a Web2 recruiting firm and then started to like transition over to Web3?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it was. We still have some Web2 clients, but it was that transition really because we just saw the future and wanted to get in on it. And it was all that we were reading and talking about. And we just wanted to be able to do that.
Smart move. Smart move.
Yeah. Got to be passionate about what you're working on.
Yeah. So I guess with that, that's so interesting. I would love to know, I don't know if you're a recruiter when it was still Web2, but I'd love to know some of like the differences you've noticed in like hiring trends, especially with, I guess, some of the more technical roles, but even like, I guess, the non-tech roles between Web2, marketing roles or engineering roles versus Web3 roles within that same position.
Sure. Something that I have seen as a trend and that I like to tell anyone who's looking for a job in the space, no matter if they're in the engineering or marketing world or social media, whatever it may be, is that Web3 has kind of leveled the playing field. And it's really created so much opportunity for like whoever wants to put the time in and do the work and, start reading about what this is, start doing all of the small basic things like minting your first NFT. But even before that, opening up a crypto wallet, buying some ETH, or whatever is your choice Web3 that you want to explore. Jumping into a metaverse and, getting on Decentraland or Sandbox and experimenting with that. I know a lot of people have kids who have been building in like Minecraft and Roblox. So
Yeah.
like sitting down with your kid and like having them even teach you a little bit about what this is. It's created this opportunity where the people who want to get ahead and be part of this growing Web3 world, you can do so just by being committed and putting the work in. Whereas I feel like in Web 2, a lot of it is based on your title and your past experience and like where you've come from and where you're at. And Web 3 is just kind of like, hey, if you want to get in, like show you're passionate about it and let's do it. Bring your crazy ideas and that's welcome here.
It's such a new space. It just, at the end of the day, like initiative trumps over everything else, it seems like, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, it's a funny thing where it feels like Web3 has been rapidly evolving where like, I think when DeFi summer happened a couple years ago, like DeFi was a big thing, then NFTs took off and now DAOs are taking off. How have you found, particularly with like marketing related roles, like community managers, marketing managers, social media managers, feels like everything kind of is starting to coalesce around community, I guess. But I'd love to kind of hear like how have you seen that evolution with different job descriptions that have been coming across your desk, or how have you been thinking about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke at DC Startup Week recently to some founders who were interested in Web3. And this is one of the pieces of advice I gave them was to think about like who they actually need and want on their team. Whether it is social media focus or traditional marketing or paid advertising or whatever that may be, to like get a sense of who you need, what those skills are before you just say, oh, I need a community manager, marketer, social media PR extraordinaire. Because I was seeing that with a lot of jobs, especially if it's a founding project or a startup company. They want someone who can wear a lot of hats. That's normal, right? But it pays if you're leading a company or you're leading a project or a team even to have that vision so that you can kind of plug and play on people's strengths and weaknesses and build a team that can work together cohesively instead of just like getting a bunch of people who can do everything and then it's trying to figure out, okay, where does everyone's efforts even need to go? I absolutely think marketing in the sense of being able to educate and onboard people into the space and what these products and projects are is a huge, very important job within anyone who's starting in this space. Just as important in my mind as like the engineers and the devs who are building the thing, you need someone who's going to be able to say, oh, this is what it actually does to the public and to the community, because without that, no one understands. Like, I mean, what I faced when I was, first looking into selling my art as NFTs was everyone who had previously purchased a physical painting, and that's what they knew. So many messages that were like, Carly, what is an NFT? What are you talking about? Like, where has your brain gone? And I'm like, okay, how do I explain this? And at that time, I didn't even know how to explain it myself. So having that person who can really break it down, I think at least for the next, I don't know, 2 to 5 years is going to be paramount.
That's something we talk about all the time at Myosin is just this. Just the reality is like Web 2, Web 3, whatever it is, just within tech, there's always people building high quality products, awesome stuff. But like you just said, right? Like just because you build it doesn't mean people are going to buy it. Like you need like product and marketing need to kind of be in sync to actually, hit that product market fit and get to the customer and sell effectively. So that resonates. Yeah.
Not to like dive too far off track with the marketing questions, but I'm curious on that point, do you feel that the onus should fall on the company to kind of help educate some of the talent that they're bringing in? Because I like to think of the space as like, and I know it's like a famous quote and people say it all the time. To me, it's not Web 2 or Web 3, it's Web 2 plus Web 3, right? So a lot of talented people are coming from Web 2, but they're eager to learn. They're like a sponge in terms of absorbing all things Web 3, specifically with, yeah, like strategy and marketing efforts and all sorts of things, right? And it's obviously done completely different in this space, but do you find that companies tend to be more open to bringing in talent that has just really good fundamental qualifications and then knowing that they'll educate that talent more so within Web3? Or on the flip side of that, they want talent to come completely Web3 fluent and kind of like crypto native, I guess, so to speak?
I think it depends. And I think it's a great point because what I always say, kind of like your quote of it's Web 2 and Web 3, I always try to remind people, I'm like, okay, and we don't call it Web 2 right now, this internet that we're in. So in another year or so, we're not even going to call it Web 3.
Yeah.
So with that, I think the fundamentals and making sure those through lines of if it's on the marketing aspect, like, do they know how to build a community? Do they know how to storytell for a product? Do they know how to build brand loyalty? Those things are going to be the same throughout Web 2, Web 3, probably Web 4, 5, 6, 7. Like those are the things that are not going to change. It's all about forming those connections, right? Learning the Web 3 is just like the new vehicles and the new ways that you can make those connections and those new inroads. Someone that I had on my podcast who's really brilliant with this and breaking it down is Ty Haney. She's the former founder of Outdoor Voices, and now she has 2 businesses that she's doing. And she explains it really well of how, Web3 is just tools for community building, brand engagement, whatever those fundamental things are that you're trying to do. Now, if you're an engineer and you want to incorporate a wallet into your app, and you're going to need someone who knows at least a little bit about smart contracts. They've at least dabbled in whether it's Rust for Solana or Solidity for Ethereum and, started playing around with those things on their own. But absolutely, I've seen with clients too that they're open to people learning on the job as long as that passion and that like fuel to learn and the interest and I would say support in the whole we are all going to make it, like those vibes are there, because of course there's a lot of people who are still skeptical of so many things in Web3, and that's natural, and I think that's even fine to have on your team as long as they also believe in the end vision.
Well, actually building on that, I'd love to dive a bit more into the actual candidates themselves. Like, is that, we've been talking about initiative, kind of, it is a very unusual, like uncertain space. Have you kind of found, well, I guess it's a 2-pronged question. It's like, number one, like, have you found any type of difference in the overall type of candidates that are trying to move into this? Because I'm sure there's all types of people who are, everyone's trying to figure out what is this Web3 thing? How did they get in? And then I guess the follow up to that is, what are the traits you've seen in the most successful candidates, the people who do succeed?
I have seen some candidates start applying with their PFPs and their ETH names. And so for people who aren't familiar, that's like, say they own a Bored Ape, that will be their profile picture. And say they are like Johnny Bananas 89 as their ETH name and their Twitter handle, that is like what they're using to apply. So that is different. And I think for some companies and some builders, like that might work. If there's communities that are aligned or, say the founder of the company is really bullish on Bored Apes and they're like, oh yeah, this is one of us. This is great. But that's something that's definitely new, right? Because in Web 2, everything is so traditional, so professional. And that's even like within the communication. I had a woman on my podcast, Anna, and she talked about how half of her conversations now are done in emojis, like rocket ships here and so not Web 2, but in Web 3, everyone speaks in acronyms and emojis, and that's just welcome. I would say the candidates that are successful are pretty much the same as in Web 2. I would say if you're going to be successful in finding a job that you love, you're going to ask questions. You're going to be reaching out to people. You're going to be coming with ideas. That's something I always tell a candidate. Like, if you're going into your interview, take 5 minutes to look at the web page, the, product socials, come with an idea or two. Founders, I think, get very impressed by people who want to like break down part of what they're doing and be like, well, hey, here's an idea of how to do it better. Like coming with solutions or using your imagination, especially in Web3, because so many things have not been done before. So if
Yep.
you come with ideas, like you're already getting ahead of the game.
Also an initiative, always.
Yeah.
Nice. I actually want to know, do you still do PR or like any event activations, anything like that? Or are you full-time recruiting now? And obviously an artist.
So we do events. That's kind of come just organically. Mostly we have a headquarters in Nashville. So we started we had branded them as Web3 in Tennessee, but now it's
Nice.
just kind of like we have partners and we're well and we all just do it together with some awesome people. Bunches is a local app. And the founder there, Derek, we had him lead some smart contract code reviews. So those obviously were developer focused. My colleague Mason, he's in Nashville. I'm not. So he leads all of these events, but he's also doing events with Vanderbilt's Innovation Center, the Wondery, and those are more like NFT 101 and the basics. So those educating for different niche communities. We've done an event here in the DC area with W3 DC. So lots of like partnering up on different things. Speaking at more and more of the Web3 events, which I feel like there are a ton. It's a little hard to figure out like, well, which one is like the one to go to? Because I wish I could fly all over the world and just speak at every conference, but maybe that will happen in 2023. Right now we're not there. And then for the PR, I would love to do more of that. I would say it's a 2023 goal of mine. It's just more like we need more hours in the day.
Bandwidth. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was going to ask about the PR and I guess like event side of things, speaking of Web3 and any trends that you're noticing there, anything that you guys do to kind of like promote those events or anything on the PR side that you think is kind of unique to Web3 or differentiates from traditional, event activations or public relations.
So something I was talking to the folks at After Party. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're based in LA. So they get some big names and they will I think rent out a big house or something. And they get all these really cool people in a room, but like with celebrities and influencers. And so I think the main difference with the event activations is who's showing up. And it's like this just melting pot of people that you never thought you would meet. Like I did a radio show inside Web3 with Shira Lazar and Ja Rule and Nick Davis were on before me. And I was like, in what world is my name next to Ja Rule? Like it doesn't make any sense. But that's what I've seen with the events definitely is, After Party, they had Sia as one of the people who came and she minted their NFT right there. So it's these activations where it's education almost involved with the event. They had like this room where they would sit people down and walk them through opening up a wallet and how to mint their specific token. So I think that's really cool.
And I'm sure at some point, maybe 2023, you guys will start, if not now, start having some of these events in the metaverse. Like many communities are already doing that. I know BFF does that.
I missed Paris Hilton's. She just had a crypto ween in the metaverse.
Oh my God.
I missed that.
Love
I
that.
was bummed, but I'm in her Discord now, so I will try to report back on the next one.
Oh my God. It's so crazy. We're like in the future. Well, I wanted to actually go back to your Women in Web3 community, which, if I'm not mistaken, is both your own podcast, Women in Web3 by Weld Recruiting, and a newsletter, correct?
Yeah, correct.
So we have an idea of how that started, right? From your initial response when we started chatting, but understanding some of the tactics that you use to promote that. Are you a heavy hitter on LinkedIn? Do you have a Discord or a Telegram community? Like, how do you promote, market your own community?
Oh my gosh, there are so many things that I wish I could do. I wish I was doing more on Instagram. I personally do not like Discord. I just can't keep up with all the notifications, but it is a great tool. I wish I did more Twitter spaces, more LinkedIn audio events, I would say. But right now I'm a one woman show for the
Mhm.
newsletter. Like, figuring out what to put in there, doing the research, writing that up every week. And that is very time
That's a lot.
consuming.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So that on top of the podcast, fortunately, we have awesome producers who help edit and do the actual making the podcast sound good and
Mm,
putting it all together. I would not be able to do that myself. But that alone is a lot, and we're keeping it free, unmonetized. Really, I feel like as our due diligence as recruiters in the space, the goal is to be able to point people who want to learn, who want free resources to figure out like, oh, I'm interested in movies and
mhm.
character IP and how does that play into Web3? And it's like, oh, then go check out Invisible Universe and what they're
Mhm.
up to and listen to this podcast episode. So the goal is really to highlight founders in the space and leaders and projects that are building things that people can listen to or read an article on and get a sense of like, oh, so this is how
Yeah.
NFTs will work in terms of getting these artifact sneakers on my feet, or how smart contracts will allow me to buy my next home, whether that's in the metaverse or in real life.
Yeah.
Um, I like to play kind of the newbie because that's how I started out, and I've just kept that going. So when people do talk about a DAO on there, I'm like, well, can you explain what that did? What
Mhm.
does that actually mean? So with all of that, I wish I did more to market it, but right now it's pretty much just posting on LinkedIn. Hopefully in 2023, it will free up some more time as our
Yeah.
recruiting team grows. And then I have, can offload a little bit more work there. But right now it's trying to juggle it all, as I feel like a lot of people are doing in Web3.
Oh my God. It's
Yeah.
a 24/7 thing, Web3. As I'm sure Carly, you got a glimpse of when we chatted
Oh yes.
initially. I was just going to ask on that. Do you find that both the newsletter or the podcast just kind of like took off without really needing much push? And I would imagine with you promoting on LinkedIn, although there's way less of a Web3 community on LinkedIn, there's obviously still very much Web2. And I think there's a lot of Web2ers that are considering transitioning to Web3. So do you find that there's a synergy between you just doing it and putting the content out there, and then the fact that it's promoted on LinkedIn, which you get certain eyeballs on that content of people who are newbies and are maybe considering coming into the space?
Fortunately, yeah. And I think that's only because I started earlier on the earlier side. I
Mm.
by no means am like one of the OGs. But I was just on the earlier side and just kept putting things out and just started, which is another tip that I tell people who want to get in the space is like, even if you don't know what you're doing, just
Yeah.
start because you have no idea where it will lead, what it will turn into. So it's crazy. Like with that, I now have people asking me to be on the podcast and share their story.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, it was very much I would just ask people, hey, I started out learning about the space by having these 15, 20-minute calls of who are you? How'd you get into the space? What are you working on? And then just I started asking people, hey, can we record this? And then I went a little bit bigger and I was like, I'm going to ask Avery Akinini if she'll be on my podcast. And somehow she said, yeah. And, then other people like Allison Downey of Meta Angels, I'll just reach out and ask. And that's the
Yeah.
other like tidbit that I want to tell people in the space is the community is, for the most part, so warm, so welcoming. So like if you ask questions, you want to collab, you want to do something with someone, for the most part, you'll get a very friendly, welcoming, like, heck yes, let's do this answer.
I love
Awesome.
that. I've just been enjoying listening because I think, what Carly's doing is so important because, I mean, Julie, you hear me talk about this literally like every single day, right? But it's like the Web3 space is still so tiny. And,
Mhm.
we all just need to be educating and helping people onboard more people into the space. And I agree, Carly. My own experience with Twitter was I had it a while ago. It was pretty resistant for a while. But once I really started delving into the space full time, I was like, I got to get more into this. And as I've grown, and gotten better at Twitter, it's always been surprising to me when you just reach out to people and they're like, yeah, that's cool. Like, let's talk. Like, let's talk about it. Like, it's just, people are generally, yeah, it depends. But for the most part, yeah, everyone's really just open and ready to chat. So it's been good. It's been good. So I guess what I'm hearing about women in Web3 and the podcast then is it's been very much, a great combination of early timing, right? So you got into the market early, which is definitely important. I think it's kind of just building and consistency, right? Just like continuing to do it. So has it been mostly word of mouth then, right? So it's like LinkedIn and just posting and just letting it grow organically. That's been the
Yeah.
real driver. Yeah.
Yeah, right now mostly word of mouth. And that's it, it was the driver that led to both Web3 clients and candidates.
Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy. And I'll let it keep doing its own
Yeah.
thing because it's cool to kind of sit back and watch. And it can be so overwhelming
Yeah.
for people if you're like, do I jump in Discord? Do I go on Twitter? Do I try and post everything on LinkedIn? So what I do, because there's just not enough hours in the day,
Yeah.
is just like, okay, let me just focus on like one primary channel. For me, that's LinkedIn. And that's like for anyone, even if you're, a marketer in the space and you want to kind of like build up your own personal brand, just start with one. Like focus on reviving your Twitter from high school. I have talked to quite a number of people who have had great success doing that, where I know there's some on Instagram. I feel like there could be even more like educational and different opportunities on Instagram that people can explore. There's this one woman on TikTok. I'm totally blanking on her name, but she just does all of these TikToks on like what's happening every day in the metaverse. So it's like, just pick your one thing that will be kind of like your bread and butter, your one thing you can stay consistent with, and then things will happen. The magic will happen.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I was going to ask if you had any kind of tips or tricks, because obviously we're doing our own thing too. So I was like, just trying to get some great growth hacks. Yeah. But picking a channel and staying in, sticking with your lane is important. So I love that. I love that.
So as I kind of mentioned before, you are obviously a master at community building and connecting people. I feel like you alluded to this with some of your previous answers, but any sort of advice on how to meet people in the space and kind of build like those genuine interpersonal connections and also just like connections to a general audience?
I would say it's scary, but don't be afraid to reach out. This is what I tell people, even how I've got like my first jobs that were in Web 2. I've always just been like, I'm just going to message every single person in that company on LinkedIn and say hi and see who wants to talk to me and who wants to grab a coffee, whether that's virtual or in person, and just like talk about what they're doing. And my thing is always like, I love hearing people's stories and what they're up to. And so that's a great, if you're like, okay, how do I start talking to someone that I love what they're doing, but I don't know how to approach them? Just say like, hey, I'd love to hear more about what you're building. And like, people will love to share it because most people in this space, if they're in this space and they're building, they're very passionate about what they're doing. They want to make you part of the community, and you will naturally kind of, build this bond. And the other thing is there are certain communities that help with initiate these connections. There's a ton for women out there. So like whatever niche you're in, if you're a person who really likes golf, there's Linkstyle, who's like all about golf. I just minted Sky Club, which you guys should be part of if you're not already. It's all for marketers. And then for the women, like BFF, Surge Women, We3, they're setting up these little dinner parties where you can get to know other women in the space. So don't be afraid. Just reach out to people. I think the other thing, the caveat that comes with that, which I kind of forget after doing PR, is like, you will get rejected a million times. You will get ghosted a million times. That is just part of the game. But then you will have like one or two really good connections, and that leads to like one or two other really good connections. And I feel like we could go down a rabbit hole of like, I feel like our society lately over the last several years has been so focused on like follower counts and big numbers and all of these things. And I feel like Web3 is kind of bringing it back to, you can have a really great engaged community of like 12 people.
Yep.
That could be enough, and like that is awesome. And so it's just reshaping like what do great connections look like and giving people the opportunity to define that for themselves.
I freaking love that. I freaking love that. Should we move to rapid fire questions, Julie?
Oh boy.
Yeah. We're just getting started. I think over time we're going to even add more, but I think we have a couple
Okay.
that we can start with. So I think the first is, what is the Web3 project that you're most bullish on, most excited about?
I would have to say BFF.
Okay.
I was at
why?
their BFF minted their first YouTube. I don't even know if, I guess it was an event where they airdropped everyone a bracelet, and I just feel like are giving so much utility, which is I think what will last in terms of NFTs, not so much the like flipping investing. But they have a perk shop where you can get it's like discounts for different stores or meeting with one of their founders. They're doing these clubs for coders or entrepreneurs. They're doing in real life event. They have so many like aspects to it. I've been a fan from the start.
I love it.
It's so timely you say that because I am going to a BFF event tonight in Miami.
I saw that and I was so bummed that I'm not in Miami, so you'll have to let me know how it goes. But yeah. I got my bracelet stolen and saved. I was so sad. It was like I was getting offers for like $3,000 at the time, and I was like, "Wow, this is amazing! I got this for free by sitting on my couch and watching Mila Kunis and Gwyneth Paltrow. Like it was the best thing ever." But naturally, I click on 1,000,001 links making my newsletter, and this was like before I realized all the different like safety aspects and stuff. And so I got it stolen, but it was like my number one thing. I wrote some articles for BFF and for Surge and different women-led projects like that. And I was like, this money is literally going to buying another BFF bracelet. So that shows how bullish I am on the community.
That's conviction. That's conviction.
Yes.
I love that. Just two more real quick. What's your biggest professional learning from this year? Just working on all this different stuff, right? Whether it's recruiting, the podcast, the newsletter, being an artist, like all that. Like what if you have to look back on 2020, is it 2022 right now? Yeah, 2022. What's the biggest learning you feel like you've had?
That's easy to say, maybe harder for people to do, but get yourself a Matthew. That is the founder of Weld. And the reason being, he is the catalyst behind pushing me to just start the podcast, the newsletter, all of these things that like I was so nervous, so not confident in like, well, it has to be perfect. I don't know how to use a microphone. Who am I going to ask? How am I going to make sure it all comes out on time? I had so many like, what ifs? I don't know. Like just like that paralysis to even get started. And he is like the most bomb ass supporter of like, just do it. Just dive in. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just do it. And that's one of the best lessons and things I've learned both professionally and personally. Because it can only lead to growth, like even if you fail. And like I said before we started this podcast, like I recorded 11 episodes with the gain all the way up on my mic, and like we're still here today.
Nice. That's incredible.
I love that. Okay, this one may be a little tougher. If you had $1 million, what would you go build in Web3 today? Separate from obviously
just like wired into your bank account, ready to go, no strings attached.
That is a tough one. My mind goes to what's on the wall behind me is like something with my art. I don't know, nowhere. I wanted to teach myself how to paint, and I kind of developed my own style of like painting on top of photographs. And I've always had this plan for how to make this whole art therapy program out of it. But at the same time, I feel like the pieces that I do that are portraits don't translate well to NFTs because they're so personal. And like, I don't want it to be something that like can be passed along down the blockchain. I'm like, no, I want to make this one piece that's just for you and you keep it forever and it hangs in your house. And like, that's what it is. So I think it would be exploring that, like, how can I do something with NFTs and art for like mental health and art therapy purposes? I don't know if that's a good enough answer.
No, that's an amazing answer. I love that. That was perfect.
Cool.
Make the world a better place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Make the world a bit more, I would say just like peaceful place.
We could use a lot
Yeah,
of that
at this
nowadays.
point.
On the inside.
In different many
We
ways.
definitely are in need of that right now. Well, I love it. Very philanthropic of you. And
Yeah.
art is it's a huge inspiration in the space.
It was a
Well,
pretty
fun.
incredible story just hearing about, the journey you've taken and all the awesome stuff you're doing, promoting founders and just working with women in the space and bringing on more people into Web3 in general. I think we all need more of that. So, applause for you. And
Right back at you. You
yes,
guys are
we're working
doing
on
the
it.
same thing.
Yeah.
I love it, and it just shows like the things that can happen in this space. You can
Yeah.
meet someone on a whim and just like help each other build and grow, and
Yeah.
that's what it's all about.
I will say it's been pretty interesting, because for myself, I used to work a lot in more traditional Web2 tech. And I think the whole like atmosphere behind Web3 really is very much a mind shift. Like just everything we talked about, this like warm, fuzzy, open collaborativeness. It's hard to put exactly into words. It's hard to put exactly in words, but I really do feel it when I talk to people, when we work with people, like, I think it's probably the virtue of this being such a small space, right? And we all kind of believe in
Yeah.
this bigger vision, but it's been pretty incredible. So just want to say thank you for being a part of that. And it's been great. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Thanks, Carly. It was such a pleasure as always. Before we wrap up, just wanted to let you show yourself a little, let everyone know where we can find you across any platforms, whether it's you or Weld or Women in Web3.
Sure. I am at by Carly Long on all the platforms. That's BY CARLYLONG. Very simple. Weld Recruiting is weldrecruiting.co. We're pretty much, I would say LinkedIn is the easiest place to find us.
Mhm.
Women in Web3 will be getting its own landing page
Ooh.
soon.
Okay.
Right now, it's like you can look it up on Apple or Spotify or the Substack or the LinkedIn version of the newsletter. So we're working on the it'll be womeninweb3.co as well.
Exciting.
Nice.
Exciting.
One centralized hub for it all.
Yeah. We're working on it. But yeah, always happy to chat with anyone and however I can help. It's the most fun thing
Go
about
reach
my
out
job.
to Carly. She's
So-
awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Okay.
thank you again. And I'm sure we'll be speaking again very soon.
All
Sounds
right.
great. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Carly.
you.
Have a good one.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode of W3G. If you'd like to learn more about Web3 marketing, please visit myosin.xyz to get started.
And of course, if you're a fan of the show, please be sure to show us your support by subscribing and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform you're using to tune in.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.